Well, I'm delighted this morning to be joined by Dr. Christian Spring, who's the STRI's Research Operations Manager. And it's an opportunity for Christian and I to talk a little bit about the issues out there. People having to maintain sports turf that they know is not going to be used, and what they need to do to ensure that that sports turf is kept in the best possible fashion to enable us, when we do get back on the straight and narrow, to get it looking good again. So, Christian, first up, I've spoken to a lot of turf managers. They are frustrated. They're having to produce, I've said it in the magazine, this issue, essential rather than sensational maintenance. Do you have sympathy for them down those lines?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is it's challenging times for everybody, from producing perfection, which is what we're all striving for in our jobs in the turf industry, because we're used to producing high quality surfaces, and we're used to thinking about what we need to do, especially at this time of year. We're kind of at a crucial sort of point in the season, springtime, depending where you are in the UK, whether if you're further on the south coast, you'll be certainly into some growth. If you're up further north, then growth is a little more sluggish, a little more resistant. So your mindset is thinking about, what can I do to make sure I go from winter trim into, if you like, in-season playing trim. And I think that's a mindset which perhaps invokes us to be working quite actively and consciously to improve quality, the performance of the surfaces, what maintenance and management inputs, renovation inputs, and now we've kind of gone very much to a very different level, and I think that's quite a different mindset and has taken a lot of adjusting to. So absolute sympathy for the guys and gals out there who are having to rethink their strategies for turf management, and not only with the sort of restrictions which are in place and the increased difficulties which when you layer on top of the existing sort of climatic and abiotic stresses that we have experienced over the past 12 months, from very, very dry, very extreme wet, very extreme dry again, for large parts of the UK, cold at the moment. You overlay that with social distancing, health and safety, additional health and safety implications. There's a lot to consider, and at the same time, a lot of golf courses undoubtedly having to have furloughed staff as well to help keep businesses viable for when we do get the nod that we can start playing golf again, or other sports facilities can start playing sport again. So I think there's a lot to getting your teeth into, a lot to process. So it's taking a lot of effort to do that, I think. And I think the guys and girls out there have done a tremendous job navigating these perilous waters.
Now, I know they are regarded as key workers, and we know rightly so. But if you're a layperson and you're walking past a sports field and you see people out cutting grass, the question might be asked, if this isn't going to be used for another couple of months, what would be wrong with letting the grass grow, and then much nearer the time, cutting it back to where it needs to be for the play to take place?
Absolutely. And again, as a layperson, that might make logical sense, reducing risk, reducing effort, reducing the time people need to go outside. But one of the things we can't forget is that most of our sports facilities, what are the key infrastructure that is there? That often it's a clubhouse or some kind of building, but the large part of it is the turf surface itself. And that is a key part of the infrastructure. And without that, if that's not maintained to a standard, if it's not maintained to a bare minimum, then that quality of that infrastructure will degrade, potentially to a point where if you look at a golf course, take the worst case scenario, and you've not been able to do any maintenance for 6 weeks, that's going to look a very different place. And how do you get that back to a golf course again? That might make, for example, a whole load of issues in terms of business sustainability, financial viability to actually return, meeting customer demand as and when restrictions are eased and folk can start playing again. So like all natural surfaces or all natural situations, it needs active management, and to not actively manage means that surface, that facility, is continually degrading to some extent, and the quality is reducing, which is going to need more input, more effort, more cost to bring that back into play again, the other side of it, which for sports clubs, golf courses, could be a real financial challenge. So that's why the government advice has been that essential maintenance is needed to keep these facilities, these infrastructures, which have already received a lot of investment to get to them to this point, need that continual care and attention. To turn around and walk away is just, it's a non-option. It could be the death knell for facilities. So that's why we've needed to do that. But as long as we can do that following social distancing guidelines, and I'm sure everybody out there, from course managers and greenkeepers through to those that manage sports turf to sports turf contractors, have all developed strategies for ensuring social distancing, good hygiene practices in and around machinery with staff welfare. We've all had to do that to some extent, and so prioritising the health and safety of our workforce and those that we're sort of working in and around potentially. So I think a lot of effort's got into it, but it is crucial for the ongoing success of these facilities.
From a agronomic perspective, is there something to be said that a season of no play, a season of rest, might do the grass plant a bit of good in the medium to long term?
I think there is quite a lot that's gone on whilst we've had these unusual lockdown conditions that's opened our eyes up to various things. We're just doing some research at the moment, sponsored by Syngenta in partnership with ICL, which is looking at aspects of golf green maintenance under lockdown conditions, which is very much looking at how do you balance growth, health, maintenance inputs to produce something which is going to be good quality, or good enough quality, as and when we bounce back, but at the same time making sure we're not over managing. And certainly one of the interesting things that come out of that is in one of the treatments where we're mowing 5 times a week, 3 times a week, and once a week. The once a week mowing regime, actually the turf is looking a little healthier at the moment, because it's not getting the wear of the machinery, it's not getting any wear from players, so it's not getting the wear from machinery, and it's kind of looking a little more vibrant, so, and a little healthier. So again, as always, if we can moderate stress on the turf, and that stress could come from management, maintenance, and play, you will end up with a healthier turf. So I think there could be a lot of facilities that are coming out of this, having followed essential maintenance, which is focused on turf health and promoting turf health, could be in a good place from an agronomic point of view. There have been some challenges that golf facilities, for example, and sports pitches will have had to have faced in terms of moisture and moisture availability through irrigation and other sources. But I think that's perhaps a part of the conversation of some of the learnings, or some of the things we could take out of this current situation, is stress and what stress we put on, and actually focusing on the health of the plant and what a healthy plant can deliver in terms of a sports surface.
Would the advice coming out of Bingley be different in these circumstances for golf as opposed to football, rugby, cricket, horse racing?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are core elements of turf management that go across all of those sports, such as nutrition, core maintenance operations like mowing and the rest of it. And I think each sport is slightly different and unique. And if you take a golf course, and in fact, managing a golf course is very much managing a landscape, and so that has a lot of complexities to it. Managing a football pitch inside a stadium, for example, is a challenge in a different way, and you perhaps how you approach your management is different. But the core aspects of what we're talking to with the industry, whether it's golf, football, rugby, horse racing, is very much the same. Look at what you're doing. Look at what your turf is needing and what the turf is telling us that it needs. Provide that, but don't go silly. Keep it under control. Keep it so that you as the turf manager have control from the products you apply, the nutritional sort of nutrition you might apply. So being careful with that, looking at the use of products, such as growth regulators, and careful, considered management to solve agronomic issues or prevent degradation of that surface is, I think, where the advice has been. So there will always be tweaking and adjusting according to the type of sport, but I think the core elements of it, the core messages across sports have been the same.
Now, I've heard, speaking to some of those out there, that what they're doing is adjusting height of cut. I'm hearing more use of, you mentioned growth regulators, that they're using Primo a little bit more. What other tips and can you offer people or suggest to people that might just make their life that little bit easier?
I mean, I think we're at the moment, I think we're in a little bit of a slightly even more uncertain position, because there are signs or conversations now happening within sort of government and sort of policy level about when does sport come back, and when do we start thinking about social golf, for example. And so I think a lot of turf managers have got this sort of understanding the need to carry out essential maintenance for plant health. But at the same point, in the back of their mind is, when is play going to start again? When am I going to be expected to need to have these surfaces fine-tuned, whether it's the greens, the tees, whether it's a football pitch, whether it's a horse race course. So again, that needs to factor into the management. I think making sure that the nutritionals and the fertilizer inputs and supportive technologies that people might be using that go along with that, such as stress management treatments, which might be using seaweeds or other biostimulant type products, make sure that we're thinking about the health of the plant during these stressful conditions, not because of play, not because of usage, but very much because of the weather conditions and the fact that the grass plant is doing now something which is not used to be it's not used to sort of six weeks without any play. And so I think making sure that we get the nutrient inputs tailored to what we're wanting from the turf. And I think it's all about perhaps having a flexibility of thought process when it comes to applying the nutrient as well, so that we're looking to achieve short-term aims as well as keeping the long-term goal in mind, such, for example, as promoting health, making sure that as grass does start to grow and has a demand for producing biomass, that we do provide it with some nutrition, but we're spoon feeding it, we're kind of easing it in, we're not overfeeding it. There's a temptation perhaps to sort of try and spike the growth to try and get quick recovery, and we're not really in that position to sort of take advantage of that or be able to cope with that necessarily, especially in the golf course industry, where we may have a lot of courses with reduced staff numbers, still maintaining the same area of turf. So it's being careful with that in conjunction with sensible maintenance practices, and addressing, and I think my view on sort of the essential maintenance is very much in line with what the RNA have said, and Bigger and other organisations. And at the same time, it's also understanding that if we have an agronomic issue, we have to address that issue, and that for me is part of what essential maintenance is. So if we have issues which are occurring on the golf course, whether it's, for example, at the moment, use of wetting agents and surfactant technologies to help with water management, I think that's really important, because a lot of facilities haven't had a huge amount of water from rainfall over the past sort of 6 weeks to 2 months. So making the maximum value out of what water we can put on through irrigation, through rainfall, making sure that the soil, for example, the moisture in the soil is locked in, it's there, it's good to go. In reality, I think what we're talking about is getting the turf in a position so it can go when we want it to go and when play is ready for starting. So I think it's all about, if you like, getting the build up in terms of growth, plant health, surface preparation to a point now where we're holding it back. It can't go full on for performance, but we want to make sure that we're ready and it's ready, so that when play comes back, we can push that button. We can say, right, we're confident we've got the plant in a healthy place. It's ready to grow. It's ready to do what we want it to do. We can manage it, and it's ready for the skill and the art of the greenkeeper and the groundsman to come into play, to kind of polish that surface ready. And I think that's kind of almost the key ethos of management at the moment, is getting it ready and then building it ready so that we're good to go as and when. It might be in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. We just don't know when that play is going to happen. So it's getting it to the point where we're happy that it's in as good a condition it can be, and it's as good as we can get it, and ready for whatever play comes our way over that short to medium term.
Now, I suppose there's a lot of guys, tough managers, champing at the bit. They're in their mess room, socially distancing, and they're looking out the window and thinking this would be a great time to sort of move forward our winter programme, because nobody on the golf course. I take it that that's not allowable, because that's not essential.
Yeah, and I think there are no hard and fast rules on this, in terms of what the government has said is that we're able to do essential work on golf courses. The government has policies in place to enable work that can't be done from home to be done from home, and following social distance safe practices. So there has been an interpretation, a quite wide interpretation of, in some cases, of what essential is. Now, I would take the view that and I think that's how the RNA have put their guidance across, and it is guidance from the RNA on essential maintenance, is, look, we've really got to focus on just doing what is absolutely necessary to ensure that our golf infrastructure, from a golf course perspective, is it is maintained without any degradation in that facility. But we need to be sensible about it, and if there are jobs that aren't necessarily vital for the sort of ongoing maintenance of that facility, bunker rebuilds, that kind of thing, then they could be delayed. Those projects could be delayed. There may be other bits of work, for example, sort of localized aeration work, which absolutely is needed, or that we've come out of winter and areas of turf need reseeding, then that in my view would also be sort of included within that gamut of essential operations, because we need to do that work to maintain the quality, the integrity of that facility. So I think we just have to have a bit of common sense, think about it from a sort of broader perspective than just what we're doing. And at the same point, we're having to balance health and safety of workers, making sure that the guys and gals doing that work are safe, and at the same time balancing the requirements of the sport and of the infrastructure itself, which is our sports fields, our facilities. So keeping on top of problems, I think, is important. But I think, obviously, being mindful of what we're actually thinking about as essential. And there's a common sense approach. There's no legislation that says you must do this or that in terms of maintenance on the golf course. It is very much an interpretation. And I think as long as we've got a risk assessment based approach where we've looked at the risks of doing the different operations, doing the different bits of work, and as long as we can justify to ourselves, to the management of our facilities, that work actually is essential for the ongoing integrity of that facility, then that is by definition essential. So I think it's the RNA has tried to give guidance, and I think that's been a good solid base and framework for everyone to base the decision-making process on.
Well, I hope life is going well for you and the rest of the team in Bingley. It's strange circumstances for us all, Christian, but what I would like to do is wish everybody well at Bingley. Thank you very much for the time you've given over to Turf Matters this morning. It's very, very useful information you've imparted, and hopefully we'll get a chance to speak again, perhaps not over a screen next time, and do this again, because it's been very, very informative.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on, Scott. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I do enjoy talking all things turf and turf geekery. As for me, to everyone out there that's maintaining these sports facilities, keep up the good work. It's a challenge. I know everyone's sort of thinking about it, getting their turf as good as they could possibly get it ready for the play. Keep safe while you're doing that, and hopefully we can all catch up soon when we come out of this thing. We could all enjoy a round of golf or a game of football.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Christian. Good to see you, and thanks very much again.
Thanks, Scott. Bye.
Bye.